Watching a great movie or listening to an amazing album is usually a good time. But you know what's more fun? Finding something that, on paper, should be entirely forgettable, but is actually incredibly good. Something that makes you ask yourself, why did they try this hard? Now, I'm not talking about something like Detective Pikachu, something that should be low quality but is actually okay. No, I'm talking about things that shouldn't have any quality at all. Things that should be the artistic equivalent of packing peanuts. Things that nobody would ever remember if there hadn't been someone, somewhere, saying, I'm going to pour my entire soul into making this the coolest thing I possibly can. Tim Follin is maybe the living embodiment of this idea. You might have heard of him as the man who decided to push the absolute limits of the NES's sound capabilities on the Pictionary title screen. Even though he had almost no formal training, he dropped out after a year of music college, he composed some really intense, rhythmically complex pieces for games like Solstice and Plok. He did blues riffs, he did little Irish jigs, he did prog rock jams. Man, did he do prog rock jams. He's like if you combined all of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard into one guy. Tim only got into making game music because his brother Mike had decided to get into programming. He followed Mike from Inside Studios to Software Creations, making soundtracks for games on the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64. Even his earliest work is incredible in its ambition. Booting up a game on a PC back then was risky business. Half the time you hear something like, but sometimes you find a banger like Flimbo's Quest that sounded like, but if you just happened to boot up the Amiga port of Ghouls and Goblins, you'd get to hear this. Some early game music feels like it's trying to work against its restraints. You can hear just how clearly it wants to be on real instruments. Tim Follin's music doesn't have that problem. Tim takes that one sound channel, the ZX Spectrum, and says, yeah, I'm gonna make the absolute best song I can out of obnoxious buzzing sounds, because that's all I got to work with. All this makes you wonder, why? Is he trying to impress someone? Is he trying to one-up someone? I mean, Tim, it's Plok.
Well, the thing is, it was all just about having a laugh to me, you know what I mean? I was just like, if I'm not enjoying it, I wouldn't have bothered, you know?
A lot of people don't know that it took until the mid-80s for any game dev to be properly credited for their work, Easter eggs notwithstanding. When Tim and Zeph were making games, there wasn't a lot of prestige to be had, and it definitely wasn't gonna be at Software Creations. Tim was making boundary-pushing music because he just felt like it. Most of the time, he barely even played the game before he sat down and started writing.
Is there anything you look back at it does particularly make you cringe that you just look back at it?
All of it, you mean?
No, no, but like there's something you think, well, you know, oh, I would have done that differently now, or...
I think I would have paid more attention to what I was doing, basically, you know, in that sort of sense, you know, because I think the music didn't really suit a lot of the games, and I was just more interested in just making up, you know, testing limits of the console or whatever it was, you know what I mean? Just to think, well, I can make this sound like a flute or something, you know, so I'll do, you know what I mean? I was more into doing that.
Tim easily could have just shown up and said, it's just Pictionary, and phoned it in. And nobody would have had a problem with that. But he didn't. And everything he ever worked on is that much better for it. Depending on how you look at it, a lot of IPs out there are either shows made to sell toys, or toys with really weird, high-effort commercials. Over time, it turned into this weird red versus blue type thing where the story started out silly because, come on, you're writing the backstory for a robot that can turn into a truck. But the franchise stuck around long enough that the kids that were nostalgic for those stories got to join the writing team and make their own. And that's how you get Megatron Mandela. Obviously nowadays, if you're a writer that's assigned to make a new She-Ra or Thundercats or whatever, you gotta try your hardest to make it a good story, because freaks like me are out there. But what if you didn't have that baggage? What if someone just asked you to write a story to sell some toys? Well, if your name is Greg Farshtey or Christian Faber, then what happens is the wildest Pacific Island style sci-fi saga you've never read. So you're Lego in the late 90s, right? And you're making gangbusters, just raking in the cash from all the Star Wars sets you're cranking out. But here's the problem. You're not making as much money as you could be making, because you don't own Star Wars. Uncle George is taking his cut from your hard work. But then you get an idea. Story-based toy line's been doing pretty good lately. You've been experimenting with making action figures out of Legos. What if you made your own story and sold a bunch of action guides from that? So you go to your ad guys and tell them to make you a story, and they brainstorm and they ideate and they iterate and they come up with do-heads. And then you send them back, and they come up with a little something called
Bionicle. Each set sold separately.
For most kids that had them, me included, Bionicles were just like cool robot guys. And sometimes for your birthday, you get the good robot guy, or sometimes you get the bad robot guy. But actually, you always wanted the bad robot guy because they look cooler actually, and had like cool weapons and staffs, and they could go like pah, pah, they could go like pah, they could go like pah. But for the kids that were paying attention, which was not me, Bionicle was actually a decade-long saga of epic wars and Machiavellian schemes and the forces of good and evil battling for the literal heart of the universe. All that kind of stuff. I could go really in depth about all the stuff that happens, but then we'd be here for literally 12 hours, and buddy, I ain't got the kind of views to justify that time investment. I got a wife. And a dog. Anyways, in 2000, a guy named Greg Farshtey is brought on board as the editor of LEGO magazine. A little while later, he gets moved to the Bionicle story team, and by 2003, he's writing basically all the Bionicle books and comics. As you might imagine, there's a pretty strict process to writing the lore behind such a big project. Basically, every time they made new Bionicles, the story team would be shown the designs for the new Bionicles and told, hey, these are the underwater Bionicles, make a story about them now. And the writers would just have to look at this dude and look at their list of pre-approved names and say, yeah, that's Gadunka. He was just a little worm guy, but he got mutated by the Mask of Life when Nocturne left out on the seafloor and he got all huge and went looking for the Mask of Life. So you'd think those kind of restrictions would not be conducive to coherent long-term storytelling. But somehow, Farshtey and the rest of the story team managed to take this weird concept of what if there were robot-type creatures on an island and make it into a universe-spanning epic. I think the best way to appreciate Bionicle lore in a nutshell is through the story of Motoro. Quick Bionicle basics. On the island of Mata Nui, there's the Toa, the big cool guys with elemental powers, the Turaga, who are like village wizards who oversee the Matoran, who are just the normal guys. So when LEGO launched Bionicle in the second half of 2001, you could go to Walmart and buy the cool fire guy Toa Tahu, or you could go to McDongo and get a Happy Meal and get a free Matoran. These were the first and at the time only named Matoran. Huki, Onepu, Maku, Jala, Kongu, and Motoro. While the Toa were off doing their wild monster fighting adventures, the Matorans were just living normal little villager lives. Motoro was an ice Matoran, and his whole job was interpreting for his village's Turaga, a weird old dude who could speak normal, but decided he only wanted to speak in bird whistles. During the first few arcs of the story, which you could experience in comic books, movies, and flash games, Motoro and the rest of the Matorans, except for Takua, were mostly side characters. They ran support and occasionally got to help the Toa out on their quest to save Mata Nui, but they never really had a huge impact on the course of things. Until Foya Nui. For the first 8-ish years of Bionicle, the basic plot was God is in a coma, and if we don't wake him up, He will die, and so will we. All the adventures revolve around this big goal, the quest to awaken and save the Great Spirit Mata Nui. So after a ton of adventures brought all the Bionicles from the island Mata Nui to the city Metra Nui, all the Turaga get together and read the stars and find out, hey, unless we do something, God is going to die in like a week. As always, Matoro is at the council of the Turaga, so he's the only Matoran that knows this. But since the Turaga don't want the Matoran to panic about an impending apocalypse, he's not allowed to tell any of his friends that they're all going to die. Eventually, Jala, he gets the Turaga to spill the beans and tell him what's going on, and finds out that the Toa all left to another island called Voyanui to try to find the Mask of Life, the only thing that can stop the entire universe from falling apart. Jala puts together a strike team of what he calls the bravest Matorans he knows, with Matoro and a couple others, and leads them all in a dangerous trek through a series of caves and also hell to get to Voyanui, to help the Toa find the mask and save the world. It's a long, hard journey, because again, they literally go to Bionicle hell, and along the way, Matoro is constantly feeling insecure, because everyone else there is a peak athlete or a soldier, and he's just a guy that knows how to speak bird. How can he measure up to anyone else? The Matoran strike team finally arrives at Voyanui, where they're all immediately struck by lightning and transform into the Toa Inika. Their quest for the Mask of Life, again, the only thing that can stop God from dying, brings them down beneath the ground of Voyanui, past the Nightmare Zone, and into the Chamber of Death. When they enter the Chamber of Death, a voice tells them that one of them must die for the rest to be able to proceed and find the Mask of Life. Jala, the leader, obviously tries to sacrifice himself, but he gets cut off by Matoro. Matoro is a full-on Toa now. His body has tripled in size. He has elemental ice powers. He can astral project his spirit out of his body. He has even fought alongside the legendary Toa Kopaka. But he still thinks he has nothing to offer his team. And so, he offers himself, and he dies. But he's immediately brought back, and the voice speaks again, and says that because of his courage and willingness to sacrifice his life for his friends, his team can pass. And then Matoro leads the team down to the Mask of Life. There's one last huge fight scene where they have to defeat the Mask's guardian, but it's surprisingly easy since the Mask has already decided that it wants to be with Matoro. And then there's a big explosion, and the Mask is knocked out of their hands, and they're blasted back to the surface, and oh no, they have to go underwater and transform into new underwater forms and fight Gedunka. Over the course of their underwater adventures, Matoro finally starts to get some confidence. He takes initiative and does important reconnaissance work on his own. Eventually, they find the Mask of Life, but when Matoro finally picks it up, it's too late. The mask goes dark. God is dead. Everyone is in shock as the world starts to fall apart around them. The island of Voyanui starts to sink into the sea. The world is ending, and there's nothing anyone can do. Anyone except for Matoro. He tells his team to hold the bad guys off and starts racing away, trying to reach the center of the universe in a last-ditch effort to revive the Great Spirit. Matoro is racing against time, swimming at full speed towards a hole in the seafloor, the only way to get to the center of the universe in time. A hole that will be blocked off forever if the island sinks down on top of it. He just barely manages to make it in, and as he's falling down towards the heart of the universe, he puts the mask on, and it starts to talk to him. It tells him that the only way to bring the Great Spirit back to life is to sacrifice himself. Matoro agrees immediately. The mask remembers another time when this had happened before, when another Toa had to sacrifice himself to save the world. Mask remembers that Toa went out with fear and doubt in his heart. But Motoro is different. All the Mask can sense in him is a determination that rivals even the will of Matanui himself. So it offers him a wish before he's turned into pure energy. Motoro's last action is to wish for his friends to all make it out of this safely. The Mask obliges, and Motoro dissolves. Many deaths in Bionicle are easily undone. Not Motoro's. His story ends here. The hero who sacrificed himself to save the universe. All this started as the backstory for a Happy Meal toy. The LEGO creative team could have easily just kept making up new characters every generation. That's what I thought they were doing. I never once suspected that my favorite green guy was the same green guy as this green guy. Nobody asked for the little ice guy to get the best arc in the entire saga. But it happened. And it happened because at every turn, there were passionate people in charge of the toy design, the narrative, the writing, artists who wanted to make the story into something real. Something that kids wouldn't just enjoy, but appreciate and latch onto and get inspired by well into their adulthood. Without those people, we wouldn't have stuff like the Sector 1 wiki or the Biomedia project. Because if nobody cares about making something, nobody's gonna care about preserving it. Was Bionicle the most important and impactful toy line ever made? No. But it did impact the people who found it.
Time, huh? Thanks for the
You know what else is usually absolute garbage? YouTube videos. I am no exception to this. I mean, you probably have me on the background right now. And hey, that's okay. It's what I deserve. I mean, who am I to ask for your undivided attention? Even if you might want to see my dog who's on the screen right now. There's good YouTube content, and then there's content YouTube content. The stuff that just fills the wrinkles in your brain like bubble wrap. On paper, a video about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman sounds like it should be in the latter category. But through incredible feats of absolute wizardry, Death Battle is one of the best shows on YouTube right now. Odds are you've probably seen Death Battle. I mean, look at those view counts. But I don't think most people appreciate just how much passion it takes to make a show like this at this level of quality. I once showed my roommate Death Battle, and the next day he told me that he had watched all the fights and he just really wished that they would make videos showing how they decide who wins. I consider him to be the median YouTube viewer. A lot of people just assume that Death Battle just chooses whichever character they like more and has them win. And that might be a comforting thing to say when your favorite guy just lost, but here's the thing. That wouldn't make a very good show. I know because I've watched people who made that show, and it wasn't very good. Oh, that's so cute. You made an animation of Goku and Vegeta beating up the whole DC universe. Tell me, is Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe your favorite comic? Do you just love to see your favorite guy win over and over? Oh, you're so special. You read for Bama, you're so brave. A show like Death Battle could pretty easily just coast on content like that. Pay some animators to make a hype scene of Goku winning and call it a day. But instead, they pander to weirdo freaks like us, who genuinely care about questions like whether or not you should count the loading time in Mario Galaxy as evidence that Mario can travel 27 quintillion times the speed of light. For as popular as the show is, power scaling is still a pretty niche interest online. I think one of Death Battle's most underrated accomplishments is finding a way to take the passion this weird little subculture has and both do justice to the people who spend hours having these arguments on forums, and simultaneously show a broader audience that it's pretty fun actually. And can we talk about the animation? They have come such a long way since the first time I googled Mario vs. Sonic in middle school. I know we're in the middle of an online indie animation renaissance, but death battle fights are on another level. Even since they lost the Rooster Teeth Warner Bros. Wallet and went independent, the quality has not gone down at all. The best part is, every single episode, every single interaction feels like it was made out of sheer passion and love for the craft and the characters. At least the newer ones, but hey, they've come a long way, and I don't have the high ground to call someone out on what they did in 2019. Bowser vs. Eggman is an enormous army versus army fight, with a ton of heavy hitters on both sides getting their moments to shine. And that makes sense. They're some of the biggest, baddest bad guys in gaming. They were in a boy band and everything. But then they go and give the same treatment to Among Us versus Fall Guys, a meme that lived and died in the summer of 2020, and it somehow works, and I watched it 5 times on the day it came out, and I still listen to the soundtrack. Can we talk about the soundtrack? Brandon Yates and Therawolf Media have been absolutely killing it with their soundtracks in these fights. They got punk, they got metal, they got a Bill Cipher versus Discord rap battle, they got Fireborn! Solid State is one of the most unnecessarily great tracks that Brandon Yates has ever put out. See, it's the soundtrack to Bardock vs. Omni-Man, but it functions as the sequel to Diabolical Invincible Me, the track for Omni-Man vs. Homelander. Each fight and death battle is within its own separate continuity, with some Chuck Norris Kool-Aid exceptions. But when characters return over the course of multiple episodes, they have the opportunity to highlight different parts of their stories, different reasons why people love these characters so much. Omni-Man's first matchup and first soundtrack are both mostly about him being an evil Superman, because that's really all he has in common with Homelander. But when he came back to fight Bardock, the writers got to focus on a different aspect that both characters had in common. They were both intergalactic conquerors who were changed by fatherhood, and the new track reflects that. It feels like this is in conversation with the last track. Like during this fight, Omni-Man is reflecting on why he's here, why he fights at all, if it's even worth it. It's the peak of what a fight scene can be. Character expressed through combat. There are so many cool touches like this throughout the show's entire 10+ year run. And they make this effort with everyone, even Scooby-Doo and Courage, and the best episode ever, Machamp vs. Goro. A good episode of Death Battle can take me from not knowing who this green sword guy is to popping off like crazy when Zoro wins, and it's just so great that it makes me ask myself, why? Why am I not making things like this? I want to make good art too. I want to make something that can move people and inspire them. It's what I want more than anything. But I could be trying harder, right? These artists I've talked about are inspirations to me. And everything they've done that I've mentioned here has been pretty niche. Surprisingly, Pictionary for the NES did not set the gaming world on fire. Bionicle was discontinued twice. No normal person cares as much as I do about Death Battle. And yet, they gave their jobs their all because they just love making good art. And they're still doing it. Tim Follin hasn't composed in years because he got bored and moved on to making commercials and short films and FMV games. Greg Farshtey is inspiring a new generation of children to obsess over LEGO product lore with his work on Ninjago. As of this recording, Death Battle is about to release Kratos vs. Asura, which looks like it's gonna be great. And if the season is any indicator, they got nothing but bangers coming down the pipeline. But I don't know them. I think it's easy to mythologize artists. It's easy to conceptualize them as hermits, secluding themselves and spending their lives doing nothing but making the output I see. But I have first-hand evidence that at least some of them are just real, normal people. They're not masterpiece machines. They have families and groceries and all the other mundanities that everyone else does. So, hey, maybe I'm not trying as hard as I could be. But I'd hazard a guess that neither are they. Nobody is a masterpiece machine. And yet the same passion still drives us. We always want to make good art. But it can take a while to get there. And when we get there, it might never be given the appreciation it deserves. And I think that's okay. Not everything you make has to be a huge, groundbreaking masterpiece. But it can always be something you're proud of.